Welcome to the show, everyone. I don't know what we did to deserve this, but last week we're sitting alongside Kentucky Lake, and this week we're sitting in an office, in a conference room. What did we do? Jason, what did you do to that?
I don't know. I mean, get kicked out of my office, and now I'm sitting in this conference room. I'd rather be outside.
We don't know what we're going to look like week to week right now on this show. This is Tennessee WildCast. I'm Doug Markham, Jason Harmon, Chuck Yost. We'll get to in a few minutes, but we're having a lot of work done over here at TWRA, having some work done on our building. So who knows where we'll be next week? Well, maybe at your house.
Yeah.
So who knows? Who knows where we might be? Anyway, good to have you here. We're still going to be doing a show, and this is Tennessee WildCast. It's the podcast of the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. Please tell your friends about it. We want them to know we're doing it. Got a good show for you today. Got a lot of current events to give you, and then we're going to talk to Chuck Yost. He is the Assistant Wildlife and Forestry Chief for TWRA, and we had the season set the other day. Most of you, I think, like it. Some of you may not like some of the things we did, but we're going to talk about them with Chuck later today. Got a lot to talk about first, though. Jason, what's going on?
Let's talk about Tagboard a little bit. We're getting that off the ground, getting it running, and people can submit their photos to us through Tagboard. It's easy. You go on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatnot, and hashtag your photos and send them right to us that way, and we can feature them on our website. You got a trophy room, and you've got the TN Wildlife, just photos of outdoor and y'all, the sportsmen enjoying the outdoors. And I'm going to show one right here on the screen. Just pull it up for the folks at home.
I like that photograph. That's cool.
This is his handle, DHammer75 is the guy's handle on Instagram. But he hashtagged TN Trophy Room, and his photo went on our trophy room board.
It.
So
good photo. And it's just a way to get y'all involved. We want to see your photographs, what you're doing, and we have we get a lot of nature bird shots on some of this stuff. And
there's a lot of especially on the TN Wildlife board. If you hashtag that, just send in your outdoor photos, birds, and just scenery, and you enjoying the outdoors.
Speaking of enjoying the outdoors, we did a little bit of it last week. We had a meeting over on Woods Reservoir, so you and I went and did some research today early, right?
Yeah, I'll show the folks at home this one too. We did a little research. Caught a little bluegill, found some bluegill beds, and
they're bedding everywhere. Yeah, Woods has a good shellcracker population, supposedly. We didn't find those, but we found about 100 bluegill beds. It was easy.
Yeah.
Get out right now if you just like action. Get your kids outside. Get Hatcher outside, Chuck. And then you can just go in a cove somewhere and look for little divots, and that's where the bluegill are. And if you have good electronics that work properly, if you got some of those down sonars that let you see the bottom really good, they'll look like like divots in a golf course on your screen, and that's a good way. That's bluegill or shellcracker when you find them.
That was my first time actually seeing them. I'd never really seen them before, and Doug showed me that, and that was pretty cool.
Pretty cool. And we never used a cricket, never used a worm, never used a night crawler. We were just using something called a trout magnet. But if you get a little bitty old jig, a little bitty, just a grub, black, white, somewhere in that color, natural colors, you'll catch all the fish you want under a bobber. And every now and then we were just casting it and just pulling it along on the bottom. It seemed like they changed through the day and what they wanted.
Yep. And
we managed to catch them, right?
It was a good day. And watch Facebook. We're going to show a little footage from that trip and put together a little video and show you how it's done.
Okay, good. And we also have some numbers to give folks on turkey that just ended. The wild turkey season is over. Sorry about that, guys. The season is over until next spring. We'll have a fall season. We're going to talk about that too. But the spring season is over, and the tally for this year, 32,254. Might go up by a few. There may be a few tags still checked in along the way, but 32,254 versus last year, 31,498. That was like 756 birds difference. And the year before was 32,633. So it was a few more birds that you got in 2014. I will ask Chuck real quick. Pretty much the same within 500,000 birds every year on the turkey stuff.
That's correct.
Yeah, just not changing too terribly much. Pretty stable populations. We know there's some issues in some parts of the state, but overall, pretty normal.
Overall, there is a lot of concern, though, in the southeast about turkey populations, and we'll talk about that some more with the regulation changes.
There's been a study that's going to take place, and I think it's a good thing for the sportsmen. Also, Jason, you got some other numbers going on or some other things going on, right?
Yeah, let's show this photo. Chuck got him a turkey. This weekend, last weekend of the season.
That's right. Yeah, I was lucky enough to get one on Saturday and on Sunday, and this is the turkey that I harvested on Saturday. It's been a really, really busy season for me personally. The work that we've been doing in the wildlife division, has prevented me from hunting much. But this weekend, since we had just gotten through with our big season setting commission meeting, I kind of put my energy towards the turkeys.
You deserved it, Chuck. You worked hard. That whole crew up there worked hard. You and Joe Benedict, Mark Goodland, Joy Sweeney, a lot of folks put many hours getting together this year's season setting, which we're going to talk about. Jason and I give you some brief things, and then we're going to get it into detail. I guess one of the biggest things that changed was there's a new unit map for deer hunting in Tennessee, and we'll get Chuck to get into that in a minute. But it's going to look different. You got a couple additional units in it now. This is official. We got C&D that's new in there, and we'll get into the units and what the bag limits and all that with Chuck in a few minutes. We also changed the definition, the commission did, of antlerless deer. Now it used to be under 3 inches. It's if it breaks the skin, the hairline rather. If it breaks the hairline on a deer, now it's considered a buck. If an antler breaks that hairline, if it's a button buck and it doesn't break the hairline, then it's not. If it breaks that hairline, is that correct? Then it becomes an antler deer.
That's correct. The change is that the antler deer limit is 2, which before the way it was stated is that the antlered buck limit was 2. So that's a matter of clarification there. So any male or female deer with antlers protruding above the hairline will count against a hunter's antler bag limit of 2. So if you harvest a deer and you look down at the top of their head and you see antler, then it would count towards your 2.
Okay. Well, let's stay there for a second then, Chuck. I was going to get into some of these others, but let's go ahead and stay on the antlers for another minute or two. Why was this done?
Well, it was done so that all antlered deer did, in fact, go towards a hunter's antlered bag limit.
Okay.
Right.
And I was looking at our Facebook page the other day after we posted what had happened at the commission meeting. Again, it was over at Woods Reservoir at the Gossick Center this past week. And it seemed like more people liked the change. Now, this is just on Facebook than didn't, but there are some that didn't like the change. They think you ought to be able to have that extra few inches to make a mistake, but that's not going to be the case anymore.
Right. The mindset is that the previous regulation created an allowance for folks that maybe thought they were shooting a doe, but it turned out to be a very small antlered buck. So I guess that's the resistance in some cases. But overall, it's my impression has been that it's positive, the response to that change. And another part of it that most people may not think about is that one of the biggest benefits of this change is it helps clarify the data that we collect. That is what we use to base our management decisions on and our recommendations on. Is this category that had kind of been created out of thin air of an antlerless buck? It's just unnecessary complexity, and when it came to data analysis, what we used to make base decisions on it was a challenging thing to help people understand how something with an antler could be considered an antlerless buck, because it did in fact have antlers, but it fell under 3 inches. Mm-hmm. So in the future, we should no longer have that issue.
All right, and you told me before we got started on there how many you can tell how many antlerless under the old regulation, how many antlerless deer were killed in the past. How many, say, last year were harvested by hunters that were considered antlerless, or in the year before? Because we made a change last year.
Yeah, it's a real interesting finding. Typically, that number of antlerless bucks, again, these have antler but less than 3 inches, that number would average around 10,000 annually. Now, if you remember, this past deer season was the first year that we had the reduction in the buck limit to 2. That number dropped to into 3,000s. It was roughly 3,700, I believe. But it was a 70-some-odd% decrease in the number of deer harvested that fell into that category. And some think that is a direct result of hunters being more selective because of the buck limit reduction.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and one of the complaints is that some folks are just going to let the deer lay there because they don't want to check it in as a buck. You got to make regulation changes. You just hope the ethics follow you, right?
That's exactly right. And there are those that are concerned about that. One might argue that that's a concern with all the regulations related to deer.
True.
So
right, I agree with that. And fishing, as a matter of fact,
True.
when you create stuff on there, you're either going to follow the law like you should or you're not. And I think most folks follow the law.
I agree.
All right. Okay, we also had some other changes. 5 additional elk tags added this year. We'll get into that in a minute with Chuck. So you got a chance to get drawn for at least 9 of them. I think one's auctioned off and one's for juvenile or young hunter, and the other 9 are drawn for, correct?
Let's see, we'll be up to 11 now.
Total 11.
And all of those, except for one, are drawn.
Okay, all but one are drawn.
All but one.
Okay,
now
one's for youth.
But you're right, one is youth specific.
Okay, all right. And this change, Chuck, that we got in the map that Todd threw up there a minute ago, what is the significance of that? Why did we add a C and a D this year? And he's got it back up there. Why is it there? And what are the bag limit significance in these things?
Well, this is a fairly large change for our regulations. But what this does is several things. One is it creates antlerless gun hunting opportunity in all counties in Tennessee. That's probably the most significant change. So it creates a lot more opportunity. If you look at this package in its entirety, there's a whole lot more antlerless gun hunting opportunities in the state now. And in some cases, specifically Unit C and D, the new units, is that number of days is limited to 16 or 7, depending on the unit, but it's all geared towards the front of the season or the beginning of the gun season, with the thought of there's more opportunity to take antlerless deer then, just because you're seeing more deer then. The deer aren't as spooked and it's easier to see them. So the idea is to create more opportunity.
Okay, and for those of us that have lived our lives in what up there is Unit L, Middle Tennessee, West Tennessee, it doesn't seem like we're not understanding the big deal of it necessarily, but it's a big deal for the hunters over east where the harvest isn't as large and where the population's not as large. Is that what's going on over there?
Yeah, it is a big change in East Tennessee, and in some areas around the plateau. But in West Tennessee, it's for the most part no change. However, there were 4 counties that were added into Unit L that were previously in Unit A, and off the cuff, it's Dyer, Tipton, Lauderdale, and I believe Lake.
Okay, so they're become in the liberal unit, and that means we got the bag limits up behind you, Chuck, and all the units except for L. L remains 3 antlerless deer a day, correct?
That's exactly right.
All right, and you see the other ones that are out there and what they are. Were there any additions on the unit C, D, and B? Did you add a deer or 2 here or there, or is it pretty much the way it's been?
Yeah, there's some change there. In Unit A, the muzzleloader bag limit was previously 4. Now that's 2 now as opposed to 4. And in Unit B, the muzzleloader bag limit was 1, and now it's 2.
Okay.
So there's a deer added there. And the thinking behind those changes in muzzleloader is that we expect the antlerless harvest to be higher in those during gun season, to be higher during gun season than what we've traditionally seen, because now we have more counties open to that opportunity, and again, it's on the front end where the success should be higher. And in the case of Unit A, that muzzleloader reduction from 4 to 2 is to help compensate for that increase in gun. So where it may be perceived as a reduction, in fact, I predict that it'll be the same harvest or a little bit more, because there'll be more harvesting gun.
Okay, all right. And had a question out on our Facebook, too, that said, why don't you just tell everybody how many deer they can kill and let them go at it? Why do you have to manage these areas differently, Chuck?
That's a good question. And some feel we just ought to set a blanket bag limit for the units and not specify gun or muzzleloader. Just get, for example, you could just say 4.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter at what point you kill them. However, there is the need to be more specific than that, in considering the fact that gun hunters are generally a lot more successful than archery hunters. So there is that need to be specific to the weapon type as you see.
Okay, all right, and it's still also over in the eastern part, populations are not as established as, and may never be because of the habitat as it is over in Middle and West Tennessee. Is there truth to that still?
there's truth to all of that. You're correct that your densities are lower in East Tennessee than in West. However, in some cases of West, they're higher than we would like them to be. So it kind of goes both ways. But in the East, the densities are lower. However, in areas where there is good habitat, those numbers are continuing to increase.
Okay. Do we know how many deer are in Tennessee now? Our estimated number?
We had an estimate back in 2010 and 11. I hesitate to estimate it currently because I don't have the data to support it. However, I wouldn't suspect that it'd be much different.
Okay, and okay to say what it was back in 2010?
700,000.
700,000. So it's under 1 million.
That's right.
That we know.
That's
okay.
right.
All right. 700,000. That's a lot of deer, and a lot of deer will be taken. Our harvest yearly now averages about what?
About 165.
165. And I know years ago when I talked about a whole lot, that 165 was always being replaced by young the next year, correct? They replenish themselves quite well with the management that we have.
That's right.
Okay. All right.
Can we make one statement about this chart? Do you think this makes it simple for the hunter to follow what they can shoot as far as doe-wise or antlerless?
Yeah. So thanks for pointing that out, Jason. One of my favorite things about this regulation is after just a year or two, the hunters in A, B, C, and D probably won't even have to pull out their hunting guides to remember when they can take antlerless deer. And that's completely new, because if you'll remember from the past, we had the non-quota hunt table in there, and
right.
The seasons were split. Some of those opportunities were 2 days, some of them were 5 days. It was kind of all over the place, and this boils it down much simpler.
Okay. All right. That will be in the guide. It's already on our Facebook. It's already on. Lee Wilmot has a press release out there in our newsroom on our website, which is tnwildlife.org. tnwildlife.org. It's out there so you can read about it. And I'm going to be working with Joe Benedict to get a nice one-page. This is everything that's done out there this week on our website, and it also be in the guide because we want to make it as easy as possible. But I think you've really simplified some stuff with this chart right here.
That's correct.
And well done with it.
Thank you.
All right, Chuck. Turkeys. There is some concern about turkeys, obviously, and there's some concern from turkey hunters. I read a lot of the comments that the Wildlife Division received during a comment period, and the most I saw, and I didn't read them every day, was from turkey hunters saying, do something about the turkey harvest. And so the agency did some, but really the commission came along and said, we're going to really restrict what's going on in the fall right now. And they knocked the turkey bag limit down to 1 in the fall season in the counties that are open. So if you live where I do in Davidson County, I think it's open to 1 bird. If you live over in Bedford, it's 1 bird. And then whatever counties are open, you can cross lines and get that another bird. I mean, you're not restricted to 1. You can, if you want to go to all counties that open, you might can get 60 or 70. I don't know how many counties are open, but Chuck, what's the reason for this? Why did they do it, and what's been the response that you're aware of?
Well, the agency had a recommendation that we reduce some of the turkey fall bag limits in counties where there is a perceived decline,
Mm-hmm.
and so that was the agency recommendation. Now the commission was thinking about this from a southeastern perspective. I mentioned earlier that there's this
Southeast Middle Tennessee.
No.
Oh, Southeast, the whole Southeastern.
Regional.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
So
All
Southeast regional.
Okay.
For the U.S.
For the U.S.
And the fact that there's this decline in the Southeast in its entirety, the commission's desires to be proactive and to go ahead and limit the fall harvest to 1 in those counties to ensure that we don't see the level of a decline that some of the other southeastern states are experiencing.
Okay, this is, remind everyone, this is an either sex hunt in the fall.
That's correct.
And in the spring, of course, you can only go after bearded birds. So we'll see how that does and how people respond to it, because there have been times where we had as many as 6 birds that could be taken in the fall in some counties, and 3, and it was all over the place. Now it's going to be 1. And I think the response will be mostly positive from hunters. Well, time will tell.
We'll see.
We will see. We shall see. Now, speaking of that and studies, the agency also got approval to spend some money on a study. Tell us about that.
That's right. So based on this perceived decline, they want to put some energy into documenting exactly what is happening in Tennessee with their turkey populations. Now, the focus of this study is in the southeast, and when I say southeast, this time I mean southeastern Tennessee.
Yeah, okay.
So the focus of the
Clarify.
work will be there. But the one of the cool things or great things about this project is that it's gonna give us great information for statewide management of turkeys. So just because it's focused in Tennessee doesn't mean that it doesn't want to apply statewide.
Right.
So this information will be used to better manage our populations.
It's a 6-year study, is that correct?
That's correct.
The total cost, I think, was $1,018,000 or something like that, but that's over 6 years, and by everybody's calculation, it's not very much money to spend over a 6-year study, and it's also all federal dollars. You're not getting none of your state dollars, license dollars are being spent on this thing, right?
Yeah, that's correct. It's either funded by federal monies or the match that's provided by the University of Tennessee. So, yeah, and the reason why this is so important is the fact that our turkeys are such a valued resource, and currently the extent of our data that we use for our decision making is harvest data. Well, we need more information than that. So this gives us an opportunity to fully document recruitment, if there's any disease-related issues. There's just tons of information that will allow us to make even better decisions regarding turkeys in the future.
Okay, and this study is going to start when? Has it been determined yet?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, it would start this coming fall.
Okay, all right, and for 6 years this will go on, and at the end of it, I expect other states will also be interested in our findings here in Tennessee. But you mentioned it, just because it's occurring down in the southern middle Tennessee part, no reason it can't be used statewide to help determine what might be causing declines in some areas where declines are taking place.
There's no doubt it'll be used statewide. So
yeah, okay, good. And it is University of Tennessee. Anybody else involved in it?
No, that's it.
Okay. All right. Now, you also been working on another very important piece of another great piece of work, and you've spent a lot of time on it in between setting the seasons, helping doing all that season setting stuff, Chuck, and that is chronic wasting disease, and a great big report on how to handle it if it comes to Tennessee. Let's tell them what it is first, and then you can tell them what you've done.
Well, you want me to tell them what chronic wasting disease is?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure we got enough radio show for that.
Do it in a nutshell.
But it's a disease that is always fatal.
Yeah.
And it's having nationwide impacts.
Always fatal to deer, moose, elk, what we call cervids. Cervids.
Okay. That's the deer family is what cervids are. Okay, and in Tennessee, the ones we have in the wild are white-tailed deer and elk, and they're both impacted by this disease. So thankfully, we don't have it in our state, and we want to do everything that we can to prevent it from coming here because it has such a crippling effect on deer and elk populations. So it's always fatal. It's caused by a misfolded protein that causes holes in the brain, which obviously leads to death.
Prion or prion, is that?
Prion.
Prion. P-R-I-O-N.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mispronounce it all the time.
Me too. All right, go ahead.
But anyway, so we want to be proactive in preventing it from coming here. But if it does arrive here, we want to do as best a job as we can at early detection and then to contain it. And what I laid out at the commission meeting last week was TWRA's response plan if the disease were to occur here.
Let me back up a little bit. It is contagious to cervids, not to people as far as we know. It doesn't hurt people in any way, not livestock. It's similar to mad cow disease the way my non-scientific mind understands, but it's not mad cow disease, but it'll wipe out a cervid population.
Well, it's in the same family of diseases as mad cow. It is not known to affect humans. Chronic wasting disease is not known to affect humans. But it has a crippling impact on the deer population.
It does, and it doesn't affect human in the physiological way, but economically and things like that, it can be devastating as far as what it does to jobs and our industry and hunting and the dollars it brings in and wildlife viewing. It can do all kinds of things. We don't want it to occur in Tennessee. It's occurred west of us in Arkansas, and they are struggling right now to try to stop it. And I just saw today in an email that Pennsylvania's picked up more cases of it up in that state. So it's around us. It's just not here. And how do we stop it from coming here? What's the preventive measures?
Well, you got 24 states and 2 Canadian provinces where it exists. And the biggest challenge with chronic wasting disease is it's environmental. It gets in the environment, so it can be passed from the environment and from animals. But
what do you mean by the environment? Food?
Thank you for asking that. Yeah. I do mean that. An animal could consume grasses that could have the prion. Okay, that's how crazy this disease is. So it could be, it can make its way into the soil, and then the plants uptake it from the soil, and then it can be transferred to animals eating that grass.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Didn't realize
so
that.
This is something that we want to do all we can to keep it out of the state. Now, preventive measures, the 2 that the agency is currently considering is, you'll recall that there's restrictions on how you can bring cervid carcasses that hunters take in other states. If it's from a state that has had CWD, then they are required to bring the meat in deboned and had clean taxidermy to bring it into the state. Now, the agency is considering involving more areas and requiring that hunters from all areas bringing those cervids into our state meet those requirements. And then there's also talk about possibly requiring that hunters who use cervid urine as a lure, that those products be certified before they're used.
Okay, that would be deer urine. Is that what we're talking about?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
All right, lures. I like that. All right. Then there are a lot of people that go. If you're wondering why do folks come in from a lot of people go out west or other places to elk hunt, mule deer hunt, whitetail hunt for big whitetail trophy, and some of the states that are having the issues I want to mention have captive whitetail deer populations. Do we do that in Tennessee?
We don't. And that's what I believe. It's just my opinion as a deer biologist, but I believe that it's a competitive advantage in a sense that we don't allow that in our state, and that lessens the amount of movement of cervids through or in our state. And I say that it's probably the number one reason why we don't currently have chronic wasting disease, because the movement of cervids is what complicates this issue and really increases the likelihood of transferring disease into an area is by moving deer or elk into or out of them.
All right, but there is some captive breeding in Tennessee of other not deer necessarily, but of other cervids that we have.
Well, there are high fence facilities that contain cervids, and in most cases those are fallow deer or Sika deer, but exotic deer, not native whitetails.
And no hunting allowed, and those are there hunting?
Well, there is hunting,
all right.
and those are permitted through TWRA, and they're permitted as big game wildlife preserves.
Okay, so still got some concerns here that we're always looking at and would work on. I think it's even part of your study a little bit.
That's right.
Okay, all right. What else is in that study, Chuck, that folks should know about? Have we hit the highlights, or there's some other things in there?
Of the chronic wasting disease project?
Right, yeah.
So the focus is prevention, which we've already touched on. Another big emphasis is our sampling efforts. We already do some annual sampling to detect the disease because early detection is so important. And, we're going to have an even greater emphasis on that program in the future because of the increased concerns, because of the new findings in Arkansas and Pennsylvania you mentioned earlier. So there's reason to be concerned about it and increase our sampling even more. But then the final part of that project is just preparing, if it is found here, to contain it. And containment is, that'll be a very big initiative, because that may require our commission to take even greater measures to try to contain it, which could include, in the case of a containment area, which will be established, maybe even increased lengths and seasons and maybe changes in weapon types. Okay. All right, Chuck. We'll get you back on here sometime and talk more about that. I hope we don't have to get you on there and talk about we got to stop it now because it's here. I'm dreading that day if it happens, and I hope that it doesn't happen, Chuck. 5 more tags. We didn't get into that too a whole lot, but in a 10-second bite, why do we have 5 additional tags for elk? Because the opportunity's there, and that's probably the change I'm most excited about. So I'm glad to know that there'll be 5 additional elk tags for our Tennessee hunt.
We'll get you back in and talk about elk, okay?
Yeah,
we'll
sounds
give you
good.
more time. Great job. I thought you did wonderful at the commission meeting, too. All right, Jason, anything else?
Yeah, if you want to watch those commission meetings and catch up on all the details, go to tnwildlife.org and follow the links there. Also, don't forget Tagboard and watch the show on Tennessee Wild or
Thank you,
tnwildlife.org.
Thanks, Todd. Hey, all these dates will be out on our website, all these hunting dates, all right? We'll see you next week.